The journey of the word education across deserts and mountains, through cities and villages, behind chalkboards and through computer screens, one word echoes in every human language. A word that has built empires, challenged traditions, freed minds, and changed lives. That word is education. But what does it truly mean? Where did it come from? And how did this single word grow to become a foundation of civilization itself? Why this story matters. We often think of education as simply school, books, or passing exams, but education is far more than that. It is identity, it is legacy, it is freedom. It is the flame that lights the soul of a child, the whisper that says you can rise above your circumstances. The ancient covenant passed from teacher to student, parent to child, tribe to tribe, generation to generation, a universal concept, countless interpretations. Every culture educates, every society teaches. But what we teach, how we teach, and why we teach tells the story of who we are and what we value. From oral traditions around fires to scrolls in temples to apps on smartphones, education has never stopped evolving. Yet, its soul remains the same: to awaken the potential hidden within every human being. In this documentary, we will travel through time, from the temples of ancient Egypt to the universities of Europe, from the wisdom of Confucius to the words of John Dewey, from blackboards to backlit screens. We will explore how the word education was born, how it was shaped by religion, philosophy, colonization, wars, revolutions, and technology, and how it continues to shape our shared future. This is more than history. This is more than language. This is the journey of the word education. And it's a journey we all walk every time we learn, every time we teach, every time we grow. Chapter 1, Origin of the Word Education. To understand what education truly means today, we must journey back to the root of the word itself. The word education comes from two Latin verbs, educare and educere. Educare means to nourish, to rear, to bring up. Think of a farmer tending his crop, a parent nurturing a child. It is about care, structure, discipline, and protection. On the other hand, educere is far more radical. It means to draw out, to lead forth. Imagine drawing water from a well. This definition points to something hidden inside, something waiting to be discovered and brought into the light. Educare equals to nurture, to train. Educere equals to draw out, to lead forth. The philosophical divide. From the beginning, these two views have been in dialogue and sometimes in tension. Plato believed that education was about remembering eternal truths already present in the soul. His allegory of the cave reminds us that true education leads the mind out of darkness, it leads forth. Aristotle, his student, saw education as shaping the character and intellect through structured training and logic. Here, education is nurturing. The purpose of education is to give to the body and to the soul all the beauty and all the perfection of which they are capable. Plato. Both perspectives are vital. One draws out wisdom, the other shapes it. Together, they form the foundation of Western educational thought, Roman civilization, and structured learning. In ancient Rome, the purpose of education was to prepare citizens, especially young boys, to become leaders, soldiers, and statesmen. It was practical, civic, and deeply structured. The educator or pedagogist was often a trusted servant responsible for mentoring the child. The emphasis was on memory, repetition, discipline, and rhetoric. Here, education was not about the child's unique voice or potential, but about becoming a polished instrument of the Republic. Transition from Latin to vernacular. As the Roman Empire fell and Europe entered the Middle Ages, the Latin language slowly gave way to vernacular tongues, Old English, Old French, and others. Yet, the word education remained rooted in its Latin origin. In monasteries and cathedral schools, monks copied and preserved the ancient meanings. Educatio continued to signify both the act of training and the sacred task of drawing the soul closer to truth. Educatio est fundamentum regni. Education is the foundation of the kingdom. Medieval proverb, the birth of the modern concept. By the 16th century, Renaissance thinkers began to reimagine education not only as preparation for life, but as the essence of life itself. John Amos Comenius, known as the father of modern education, declared that education must not be the privilege of the few, but the birthright of all, rich or poor, male or female. The word education was no longer only about structure and control, it now included imagination, creativity, discovery, and transformation. All who are born human should be educated in the full sense of the word, comenius. So we see, from its Latin roots to its global interpretations, education has never been a fixed idea. It is a living word evolving, expanding, and echoing across the centuries. Whether it is the nurturing of a child or the awakening of genius, the word education continues to carry both the discipline of shaping and the wonder of discovery. Chapter 2. Education in Ancient Civilizations, Egypt, the Wisdom of the Nile. Long before the printing press, before Greek philosophy or Roman law, there was the Nile and there was Egypt. In ancient Egypt, education was seen as a divine responsibility, a gift from the gods to maintain order, known as mat. The highest symbol of intellectual prestige was the scribe, one who could read, write, and interpret sacred knowledge. Children of nobles were trained in temples and royal schools, learning mathematics, astronomy, engineering, and sacred texts. The schools were often attached to temples, and learning was intertwined with religion, ethics, and service to the pharaoh. The scribe is greater than the carpenter or farmer, for his words build kingdoms. Egyptian proverb, Mesopotamia, clay, cuneiform, and civilization. In the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, another cradle of learning was born, Mesopotamia. Here, education was preserved in clay. The Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians believed that knowledge was power, especially in administration, commerce, and astronomy. The Adaba was the world's first recorded institutional school. Reserved mostly for boys from elite families, students endured rigorous training to master cuneiform, the complex script used for writing. The discipline was harsh. Mistakes could lead to beatings. But the reward was immense: access to the priesthood, royal court, or mercantile elite. India, the Vedas, and the Gurukul system. In ancient India, education was a sacred journey, not merely intellectual, but spiritual. It was the pursuit of truth, self-realization, and harmony with the universe. The oldest texts, the Vedas, contain hymns, mathematics, philosophy, and rituals. These were passed down orally by Brahmin priests in what was known as the Gurukul system. The relationship between the teacher and student was deeply personal. The Shishya lived with the guru, performed daily chores, and received wisdom through discipline, devotion, and example. Unlike modern schooling, there were no blackboards or bells, only learning through living. Education is that which liberates. Ancient Sanskrit proverb, China, the Confucian ethos. In ancient China, education was the golden thread that bound morality to governance. Influenced profoundly by Confucius, learning was not for wealth, but for wisdom, virtue, and service to society. Confucian teachings emphasize 5 virtues: benevolence, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faithfulness, all cultivated through rigorous self-discipline. Li ritual, Ren benevolence, Zhu learning, civil service exams that lasted days. Education became the pathway to leadership. The civil service examinations, one of the most advanced in the world at the time, tested poetry, ethics, law, and classical philosophy. They open doors from poverty to power. Education breeds confidence. Confidence breeds hope. Hope breeds peace. Confucius graced the birth of liberal education. While other civilizations trained administrators or priests, the Greeks pursued the soul's perfection. Education, or paideia, was a holistic cultivation of body, mind, and spirit. It was preparation for the highest ideal, citizenship. Socrates used questions to spark reflection. Plato taught abstract truth. Aristotle emphasized empirical observation. Together, they laid the philosophical groundwork for Western education. Paideia, formation of character and intellect. Read excellence, logos, reason. In Athens, every free male child received education in music, poetry, rhetoric, and gymnastics. In Sparta, it was discipline and warfare. But both saw education as shaping the future of the city-state. Reflections, a tapestry of learning. Across continents and centuries, education took many forms: inscribed in stone, whispered by firelight, tested in courts, preserved in temples. Whether in the banks of the Nile, the deserts of Mesopotamia, the forests of India, or the halls of Athens, the purpose was always the same: to pass on what matters. Not just information, but identity. Not just facts, but values. Not just skills, but soul. Chapter 3. Education in the Middle Ages and Religious Traditions. The fall of Rome and the rise of religious education. When the Roman Empire fell in the 5th century, much of its civic education system collapsed with it. Schools closed, libraries burned. Europe entered what some called the Dark Ages. But the light of learning was not extinguished. It was quietly preserved behind monastery walls. In monasteries, cathedrals, and abbeys across Europe, education became the sacred duty of monks. They copied ancient manuscripts, taught Latin grammar, and passed on biblical doctrine. Scriptorium, where monks copied books, trivium grammar, logic, rhetoric, quadrivium arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy. Cathedral schools and scholasticism. From monastic beginnings came cathedral schools, centers of learning open to clerics and nobles. By the 12th century, these evolved into universities. The central goal of education during this time, the pursuit of divine truth through reason and faith. Thomas Aquinas, Anselm of Canterbury, Peter Abelard. This movement became known as scholasticism. It aimed to harmonize theology with philosophy, especially the works of Aristotle. Lectures, debates, and disputations became common methods of learning. Reason is the handmaid of faith. Thomas Aquinas. Jewish traditions of education. For the Jewish people, education was not a privilege, it was a commandment. Torah study was central to community life and identity. In every generation, from ancient Israel to medieval Europe, parents were instructed to teach their children the law of God. Shema, teach them diligently to your children. Cheder, Jewish elementary school. Yeshiva, advanced Talmudic academy. The emphasis was not only on memorization but also on interpretation, discussion, and debate, especially in Talmudic tradition. The question was never discouraged, it was encouraged. Whoever teaches his son teaches not only his son, but also his son's son. Talmud, Islamic Golden Age, and madrasa education. While much of Europe was rebuilding, the Islamic world flourished in a golden age of knowledge. From the 8th to the 14th century, cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Rhoda became beacons of learning. Education was both a religious duty and a public good. The Prophet Muhammad declared, "Seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave." Beit al-Hikmah, House of Wisdom. Baghdad, Madrasa, Islamic school subjects, Quranic studies, logic, medicine, philosophy, astronomy. Muslim scholars preserved and expanded upon Greek, Persian, and Indian knowledge. They translated texts, wrote encyclopedias, and innovated in fields ranging from algebra to optics. Education in the Islamic world was deeply spiritual, rooted in the Quran, but also practical and global. Education in African kingdoms. In West Africa, education thrived in empires like Mali and Songhai. In Timbuktu, students from across Africa and the Middle East came to study in Islamic universities that rivaled those in Europe. But African education wasn't just written, it was sung, danced, spoken. Griots, the oral historians, preserved centuries of wisdom, lineage, law, and philosophy. Griot, oral historian and teacher, Sankore University Center of Learning in Timbuktu. Subjects, law, theology, astronomy, poetry, medicine. Here, education was not removed from daily life. It was woven into ritual, art, community, and memory, synthesis, and legacy. Across the religious traditions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and African spirituality, education was sacred. It was not only about making a living, it was about understanding life, honoring God, and serving society. Through their teachings, these traditions help keep the flame of knowledge alive through some of humanity's darkest and most glorious chapters, the Renaissance and Enlightenment. Printing press by Gutenberg, democratization of knowledge, rise of universities, Bologna, Paris, Oxford, etc., shift from theological to humanistic studies. Enlightenment thinkers, Locke, Rousseau, Voltaire. Education for liberty and human potential. Education as a path to reason, science, and freedom. Chapter 4, the Renaissance, humanism, and the printing press. Awakening in Europe. The Renaissance begins from the 14th to the 17th century. Europe underwent a profound rebirth, a renaissance, meaning rebirth that would forever change the course of education, thought, and creativity. At the heart of this movement was a revival of classical learning, the rediscovery of Greek and Roman texts that had been preserved in monasteries and the Islamic world. Renaissance, rebirth of classical culture, Studia Humanitatis, grammar, rhetoric, history, poetry, moral philosophy. This period saw a shift away from strictly religious education to one that embraced the full spectrum of human experience, literature, art, ethics, and critical thought. Humanism education focused on the individual. At the center of Renaissance education was humanism, a new philosophy that celebrated the dignity, worth, and potential of the individual. Humanists believed that education should not just prepare clergy, it should prepare citizens, thinkers, leaders, and moral individuals. Man is the measure of all things. Protagoras popularized again in this era, a room without books is like a body without a soul. Humanist schools began to teach the humanities subjects that help individuals live well, speak well, and think clearly. This was the birth of a well-rounded liberal education. The invention of the printing press, a revolution in learning. Then came a spark that ignited a wildfire, the invention of the movable type printing press by Johannes Gutenberg around 1440. For the first time in history, books could be mass-produced. No longer chained to monastery desks, knowledge began to travel faster than ever before. Gutenberg Bible printed in 1455, over 20 million books printed in Europe by 1500. Literacy began to rise rapidly. The printing press was more than a machine, it was a cultural detonator. Ideas spread, literacy surged, education became more democratic. Printing is the ultimate gift of God and the greatest one. Martin Luther education becomes a tool for change. With books came bold ideas about science, politics, religion, and the rights of man. Education was no longer confined to the elite or the clergy. Now, merchants, artisans, and even women began to seek knowledge, often in private or informal spaces. The seed of universal education had been planted. Women philosophers like Christine de Pizan. Schools in Northern Europe, early scientific diagrams by Copernicus and Vesalius. The Renaissance laid the intellectual foundation for the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, and ultimately for modern education systems. Legacy of the Renaissance in modern education. The Renaissance transformed the meaning and method of education. It opened the classroom to creativity, inquiry, and individuality. We still echo its legacy every time a student studies literature, paints a canvas, or asks why, instead of just how. Education was no longer just a path to salvation, it became a path to understanding the self, the world, and our shared humanity. Chapter 5. The Enlightenment and the Rise of Public Education, the Age of Reason, a new light dawns. The 17th and 18th centuries brought about a bold new era, the Age of Enlightenment. It was an age where reason, science, liberty, and the rights of individuals were championed above tradition and superstition. Education became the driving force behind societal change. No longer reserved for elites or clergy, knowledge was now a tool to shape free-thinking citizens. Rationalism, empiricism, individual rights, philosophes, French Enlightenment thinkers dared to know. Have the courage to use your own reason. Immanuel Kant, education as a social responsibility. Enlightenment thinkers believed that ignorance was the enemy of freedom. Education, therefore, was no longer just a personal privilege, it became a public responsibility. Jean-Jacques Rousseau advocated for natural education, allowing children to learn by exploration and curiosity, not just memorization. Others like John Locke and Condorcet argued that a well-informed citizenry was essential to a healthy democracy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Émile, on education. John Locke, essay concerning human understanding. Marquis de Condorcet, early proponent of universal education. The only way to make men free is to educate them. Condorcet, foundations of modern public schooling. The Enlightenment gave rise to state-supported education systems. In Prussia, a structured model of public schooling was developed that would influence the entire world, including modern-day education in Europe and America. Education became systematic, secular, and compulsory. Subjects now included mathematics, geography, reading, science, and moral instruction, not just religious doctrine. Prussian education system, compulsory schooling laws in Massachusetts 1647. The common school movement in 19th century America, this was a revolutionary shift, the idea that every child, regardless of class, should receive a basic education as a right, not a reward. Women and the expanding access to learning. The Enlightenment also sparked discussions about the education of women. While still controversial, brave voices like Mary Wollstonecraft insisted that women deserved the same intellectual development as men. The ripple effect slowly began to break centuries-old barriers, allowing girls into schools and encouraging women to become teachers, authors, and scholars. Strengthen the female mind by enlarging it, and there will be an end to blind obedience. Mary Wollstonecraft. The idea that education belonged to all regardless of gender began to emerge, even if it would take centuries to fully realize. Education as the engine of enlightened democracy. As Enlightenment ideals spread, they influenced revolutions in America, in France, and beyond. Central to every call for liberty and justice was the belief in educated citizens. Thomas Jefferson argued that democracy depends on an informed electorate. Schools, libraries, and universities were seen as the guardians of a free society. Educate and inform the whole mass of the people. They are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. Thomas Jefferson. The Enlightenment gave us more than scientific breakthroughs or political manifestos. It gave us a vision that education is the foundation of human freedom and that ignorance is its greatest threat. Here is the fully expanded Chapter 5, The Enlightenment and the Rise of Public Education, from your 3-hour video script titled The Journey of the Word Education. Chapter 5, The Enlightenment and the Rise of Public Education. The Age of Reason. A new light dawns, candlelight turning into sunlight. Philosophers debating in salons, writing at their desks, diagrams of the solar system, maps, and anatomy books. The 17th and 18th centuries brought about a bold new era, the Age of Enlightenment. It was an age where reason, science, liberty, and the rights of individuals were championed above tradition and superstition. Education became the driving force behind societal change. No longer reserved for elites or clergy, knowledge was now a tool to shape free-thinking citizens. Rationalism, empiricism, individual rights, philosophes, French Enlightenment thinkers dared to know. Have the courage to use your own reason. Immanuel Kant. Education as a social responsibility. Enlightenment thinkers believed that ignorance was the enemy of freedom. Education, therefore, was no longer just a personal privilege, it became a public responsibility. Jean-Jacques Rousseau advocated for natural education, allowing children to learn by exploration and curiosity, not just memorization. Others like John Locke and Condorcet argued that a well-informed citizenry was essential to a healthy democracy. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Emile. On Education. John Locke essay concerning human understanding. Marquis de Condorcet, early proponent of universal education. The only way to make men free is to educate them. Condorcet. Foundations of modern public schooling. The Enlightenment gave rise to state-supported education systems. In Prussia, a structured model of public schooling was developed that would influence the entire world, including modern-day education in Europe and America. Education became systematic, secular, and compulsory. Subjects now included mathematics, geography, reading, science, and moral instruction, not just religious doctrine. Prussian education system. Compulsory schooling laws in Massachusetts. 1647. The common school movement in 19th century America. This was a revolutionary shift. The idea that every child, regardless of class, should receive a basic education as a right, not a reward. Women and the expanding access to learning. Mary Wollstonecraft writing, Vindication of the Rights of Woman. Girls in schoolrooms learning arithmetic and literature. First female teachers and women's colleges being founded. The Enlightenment also sparked discussions about the education of women. While still controversial, brave voices like Mary Wollstonecraft insisted that women deserved the same intellectual development as men. The ripple effect slowly began to break centuries-old barriers, allowing girls into schools and encouraging women to become teachers, authors, and scholars. Strengthen the female mind by enlarging it, and there will be an end to blind obedience. Mary Wollstonecraft. The idea that education belonged to all regardless of gender began to emerge, even if it would take centuries to fully realize. Education as the engine of enlightened democracy. As Enlightenment ideals spread, they influenced revolutions in America, in France, and beyond. Central to every call for liberty and justice was the belief in educated citizens. Thomas Jefferson argued that democracy depends on an informed electorate. Schools, libraries, and universities were seen as the guardians of a free society. Educate and inform the entire group of people. They are the only true foundation for protecting our freedom. Thomas Jefferson. The Enlightenment gave more than discoveries or government ideas. It offered a belief that learning builds freedom and that lack of knowledge is its biggest risk. Chapter 6, Industrialization, Mass Schooling, and the Global Spread of Education. The Industrial Revolution. New demands and knowledge. The 1800s brought a new change not in thoughts, but in machines. Steam power, growing factories, and large city life changed everything. But these changes brought problems too, like low reading levels, child work, and a bigger divide between those who could learn and those who could not. This new age needed education that could teach many people how to read signs, understand numbers, and follow routines, key themes, machines, growing cities, factory rules. School laws in 1800s Europe and the United States, the growth of public education. Governments started to see that learning was not just personal, it was something the country needed. In the 1800s, places like Prussia, Britain, France, and the United States made school for young children a legal rule. Leaders like Horace Mann in the United States pushed for what became known as the common school idea. Jules Ferry in France helped pass laws for free and required schooling that did not follow a religion. The Prussian system became a guide for many around the world. Laws now say kids must attend school. Reading, basic math, national values, and basic behavior lessons became common everywhere. Education beyond all other tools is the great leveler of people, Horace Mann. The school as a system concerns about factory-like learning progress brought worry. Schools started to copy factory life-type rules, repeated steps, and focus on control. Children moved through grades with little space for creativity or their own pace. People asked, is this learning or control? John Dewey, Change in Learning Style. Paulo Freire, Learning for Freedom. Ken Robinson, Modern Learning Voice. Some began to speak up. They said schools should inspire thinking, not just memory, learning around the world. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, Western school systems spread worldwide through global control, faith-based work, and deals between nations. This helped bring reading to many, but also forced outside beliefs onto local ways of life. Key terms: colonial school systems, faith-based schools, changes after independence. In time, local areas reshaped these systems to match their own stories and values. Let me know if you'd like this as subtitles, script formatting for voiceover, or synced with visuals. Toward universal education. By the mid-20th century, the idea of universal education took global root. Institutions like UNESCO declared education a basic human right, not a privilege, not a luxury, but a right. In 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights enshrined this with bold clarity. Everyone has the right to education. Everyone has the right to education. Article 26, utter. From dusty rural villages to bustling megacities, the world began to chase a shared dream that every child, regardless of background, should have the chance to learn. The industrial age taught the world that education is not only for the few, it must be for all. For every child sitting in a classroom is a future being shaped, a society being built. Chapter 7, The Digital Age, Online Learning, and the Future of Education. The Internet Revolution, Learning at the Speed of Light. As the 20th century closed, a new revolution emerged, not powered by steam or steel, but by silicon and signals. The Internet connected the world in ways previously unimaginable. Suddenly, information became accessible from almost anywhere. The classroom was no longer confined by walls or borders. Education had entered cyberspace. First online courses in the 1990s, rise of Google, Wikipedia, YouTube, and digital textbooks, growth of platforms like Khan Academy and Coursera. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. Alvin Toffler. The rise of online and remote learning. By the early 2000s, online learning evolved from novelty to necessity. Students could earn diplomas, degrees, even doctorates without ever stepping foot on campus. Learning became more personalized, interactive, and convenient. For the first time in history, a child in a remote village could sit in the same virtual classroom as a child in a bustling metropolis. Massive open online courses, MOOCs, blended learning, and flipped classrooms platforms. edX, Skillshare, Teachable. This was more than convenience. It was a lifeline for millions who had been left out of traditional systems: working parents, refugees, disabled learners, and more. Education during global crisis. COVID-19 eased shockwave in 2020. A global pandemic shut down the world, and with it, schools. COVID-19 forced nearly 1.6 billion learners out of classrooms. But education did not stop, it adapted. Teachers became digital instructors, families became learning hubs, and the internet became the global school. UNESCO data on school closures. Growth of digital teaching tools like Google Classroom and Microsoft Teams, spike in educational app downloads worldwide. The crisis exposed inequalities. Internet access, digital devices, and tech literacy became the new divides. But it also proved that learning could happen anywhere, under any condition. The emergence of artificial intelligence and adaptive learning. Now, we enter a new frontier: artificial intelligence. AI doesn't just store information, it adapts, predicts, and personalizes learning paths. Smart algorithms can detect where a student is struggling and adjust the lesson instantly. The dream of one-on-one tutoring for every learner is becoming real through machines. Platforms like Duolingo, Dreambox, ChatGapt, Kamigo AI-assisted grading and content generation. Virtual labs and simulations for science learning. But this raises questions. Who controls the data? Will teachers be replaced? How do we preserve human connection in a tech-driven classroom? Technology will not replace great teachers, but technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational. George Couros, Reimagining the Purpose of Education, 16/00/2000. As we look to the future, one thing is clear: education is no longer just about memorizing facts or passing exams. It's about creativity, compassion, adaptability, and collaboration. It's about preparing learners to shape a world we cannot yet see. Emotional intelligence and life skills in curricula, interdisciplinary learning and global citizenship, sustainability, education, and ethical tech literacy. Education must evolve not just with the times, but for the times. The goal is not to create better test takers, but better humans. From oral traditions to AI tutors, from stone tablets to cloud servers, the journey of the word education is the journey of humanity itself. As long as we strive to learn, grow, and enlighten, the journey will continue. Here is the final chapter of your 3-hour video script, fully expanded. Chapter 8, Conclusion: The Eternal Power of Education, a Journey Through Time, Recap and Reflection. We've traveled across time, across continents, and across the changing definitions of one timeless word: education. From the whispers of wisdom around ancient fires to the virtual classrooms of today, education has always been humanity's guiding light, passed from generation to generation like a torch. Illumination, transformation, liberation. Education as power, real stories. Education is not just the transfer of information, it is the unlocking of human potential. It is the difference between oppression and freedom, between poverty and opportunity, between darkness and light. Malala stood for girls' right to learn. Mandela knew that education could rebuild a nation. You watching this are part of that same story. Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Nelson Mandela, the unfinished story, challenges we must face, but the story isn't finished. 250 million children today still lack basic reading and math skills. Millions more are denied access to learning because of gender, poverty, war, or disability. The journey of education is also a fight against ignorance, inequality, and injustice. UNESCO Global Education Monitoring reports literacy rates by region, digital access divide. If education is light, then we must ask, who is still living in the shadows? And what are we doing to bring them into the light? You are the next chapter. The journey of the word education is not a history lesson, it is a living story. And yes, you are its next author. Whether you are a parent teaching values, a mentor giving hope, or a learner chasing purpose, you are part of a movement older than time itself. Education begins not in systems, but in hearts, not just in institutions, but in intention. One child, one teacher, one book, one pen can change the world. Malala Yousafzai, final words: the eternal flame. Education is not simply about school. It is about soul, about lighting fires of curiosity, compassion, and courage. It is a journey that transforms not just minds, but destinies, not just individuals, but generations. It is the great equalizer, the silent healer, the invisible architect of a better world. The journey of the word education is the journey of all who dare to believe that a better world can be learned and built. Let us teach, let us learn, let us rise. The journey of the word education, written and narrated by Apostle Israel Aloia. Linguistic Legacies.